Today, we're looking at Colorverse Saturn V. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Colorverse Saturn V is a blue ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples, I put the ink into a different pen for a day, I then put it into a cross Bailey with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we go to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is a very faint blue line across the bottom that looks like it's holding on. It's pushing its way up as a dark blue, but across the top, we see a very different, lighter blue that's there. This is two different blues. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That dark blue really formed a line on the bottom, seeped into this filter paper very quickly, and then didn't move. It pushed its way up, what was left of it, and then we still see that very light blue at the top. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I would not use this. Not as a note taker. Look at what happens to that lowercase h. Completely blown out, and I'm worried that whole words would become unreadable. Now, water's reactivating and lifting most of this ink off the page. It's still leaving a bunch of that blue that was in the second chromatography. And Pen Flush does the same thing. It's taking all the darkest tones, but still leaving some of that blue behind very there. Now, 1/3 bleach solution completely removes it from the paper. And if you had to use a 1/3 bleach solution to get this out of your pen, just immediately flush it with water so you don't rust the metal parts. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Colorverse Saturn V has a viscosity of 2.67, making it just normal. Yep. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Colorverse Saturn V has an average dry time of 18 seconds, making it again normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It has spots of shading going on, like the C is a bit darker than the rest of the word. The T at the top is a bit darker, and the N gets a little bit darker. The upper left of the V is a bit darker, so we see some shading going on. It's pretty nice. The extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it has, trying to open a water, it has some of that intermittent shading that we saw with the 1.1. So when I'm looking at the word the, H is a bit darker than the rest of the word. The K in quick is a bit darker. The B in brown is a bit darker. The X in fox a bit darker. We do get some shading spots going on. 12 seconds to dry. Now, medium is a noticeably darker tone, same dark tone as the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shading here. 17 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, when you look far left to far right, you see some color variation, and we got some up here. And the medium shows none, and we got none. The smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding. We get ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The blue is like a dusty blue on this paper. I've noticed that Tomoe River can give it that kind of dusty look sometimes. It's just an interesting thing. Extra fine is just a little bit lighter. It's like 1 or 2 tones lighter than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 19 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the 1.1, so it's just a shade or 2 lighter than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 28 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. In the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade here. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer some shading, like on the left side of the Q in quick is a bit darker, the K is a bit darker, the H in the is a bit darker. The LAZ is darker than the Y. Fox starts as a lighter tone and gets to be very dark at the X. So we do get some nice shading on the extra fine. It took 13 seconds to dry. The medium becomes darker than the extra fine, the same tone that I got in the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 17 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation when we look far left to far right, and we got some in the writing. The medium has no color variation, and we got none. And the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. So life paper. Life paper has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a lighter tone. It's actually quite a bit lighter than we've seen on some of the other paper. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. The shade is a little bit better here, like the H, the K, the left side of the Q. The B and the R are darker than Arresta Brown. Fox goes from lighter to darker. The right here is very dark compared to the word dry. Lazy starts very dark and works its way light in the Y. 12 seconds to dry. Now medium becomes a very dark tone. It's a little darker than the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading. 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine, when you look far left to far right, you see some color variation. And this has been some of the best color variation and shading that we've seen of this ink. The medium shows no color variation, and we didn't get any. In the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Levenger paper. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is only a little lighter, about 2 tones lighter than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and we do get some shading back, like the Fox goes dark to light to dark. Jumps starts very light and becomes very dark. Over starts dark, gets light in the middle, gets dark again, and then the hoop and the E gets light again, it gets dark again. It's very nice right there. Brown starts dark and gets light. 8 seconds to dry. The medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine. It's slightly darker than the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading. 14 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, looking far left to far right, you see plenty of color variation, and we get plenty up here in the extra fine. The medium had none, and we got none. The smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Franklin Christoph. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a tone lighter than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 6 seconds to dry. The medium is a darker than the extra fine. It's the same dark tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 9 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine and the medium show no color variation, and we got none. And the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Colorverse Saturn V, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted a nice dusty red. I went with Birmingham Pen Company's Bloomfield Red. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe So what do I think of Colorverse Saturn V? This is a perfectly decent dark blue ink. It does occasionally offer bits of shading, which is nice. There's a lot of blues out there, and this is expensive. And it's just a nice blue. It's not a great blue. That makes it where you're like, I have to have this as someone who uses a lot of blue ink. Nothing speaks to me in that way for this ink. Thanks for watching.